So I'm working on Cable and X-Force, see, for me, I just assumed, because Rob at this point was like a bajillionaire and, was Mr. Image and Youngblood selling a bazillion copies, and X-Force still the number 2.
I'm a supernova. I was a supernova. Come on.
You were, and also, better looking than Matt Damon at the time.
Not true.
And so I just assumed he had no idea. Like, usually when guys leave books, it's like, goodbye. I couldn't tell you what's happening on that book or why, because it's too painful to watch, like, the next guy basically come in and go, yeah, that was a dream, and then move on. And you guys encourage that stuff because you go, yeah, we're so glad you said that was a dream. So I'm working on these books, minding my own beeswax, and as I walk around WonderCon, I see this announcement for Heroes Reborn. And there is Rob's drawing of Captain America and the flag, and it says, for God, for country, for forever. Yep. And I walk by, and I was like, that and the Jim Lee Heroes Reborn thing are going to be the biggest things of the year. This is the way that Marvel gets back and takes over all the stuff and knocks Image out of the park and all that stuff. Because this was a time, some of you are not old enough to remember this, but there was actually a time when the X-Men ruled, no one bought the Avengers. People have a very fond memory of Wade and Garney on Captain America, but the reality is no one bought that book either. No one was buying the Fantastic Four, and no one was buying Iron Man. And guys, this is not me like recreating history. You have to think about it. They wouldn't have given Rob and Jim those books if those books were selling gangbusters. It wouldn't have made sense economically to do that. They didn't give them the X-Men. The X-Men were just fine. And they were known for the X-Men, so you would think if they were going to give them anything, they would have given them the X-Men, but the X-Men were selling super, super cool. But the Image books were kicking ass all around the block, and so they made a deal with Rob and Jim to come in and produce these books. And then, took people like me and Scotty Liebdell and a bunch of other guys, which really upset them because they didn't think that was going to happen at all, to go and make these books. So I'm minding my own business at WonderCon when Rob came up to the table and said, do you want to be part of this group? And it literally, I'll steal from him because I'm not a sports fan, but it was like, do you want to play with Kobe and the Lakers? I don't know, but we're in Phoenix, so what would we say?
Nash and Stoudemire back when the Phoenix Suns were ripping it up. So,
Okay.
before last night's game.
It was. This was for me. You gotta understand. Like I was on Cable and X-Force. They were the second.
Okay, he's leaving out. Here's the deal. He was standing right there, and I saw that his name was Jeph Loeb, and you understand. He's like, oh, people don't remember names. No, when you have a name like Jeff, the first time you meet it, you go, what the hell's up with that spelling of that name? I will remember that the rest of my life. So he's standing in front of the booth in San Francisco WonderCon, and I went up to him, and this is what shocked you. There's that little E.T. looking guy that was in Cable.
Yeah.
And his name
Blacksmith.
was Blacksmith. And I went up to him and I said, dude, I love your Cable and I love what you're doing with Blacksmith. And Jeff was like, are you kidding me? You reading Cable? And I'm
Yeah,
like,
no, I was completely, that was why I said most people just walk away and
I was a
look at
huge
their
fan.
books.
I was a huge fan of. I thought that Jeff's run with Ian Churchill and Steve Scrose was really taking that book places it hadn't been in years. And so of course I knew who Jeff was, and he had taken over X-Force as well. So and look, I always follow, especially if you create a franchise, you're gonna always follow. You're always gonna look at it, and you're gonna see when people knock it out of the park. I remember when I left X-Force to go to Image, I thought Greg Capullo. I was like, this guy is amazing. Why did I ever leave? Everyone's going to forget about what I did, because everybody wants to be like, they'll remember my run. And I was like, oh, Capullo is awesome. He is freaking awesome. And, same with Jeff's Cable run with Churchill and Scrose. I was like, wow, this is really, Cable is an extremely interesting, compelling book again. And, the thing is, I don't even remember who did it before then, because it just smacked me in the face when they started doing it. So Jeff was shocked, and Jeff was inquiring, hey, what are you doing with Heroes Reborn? And the fact is, I had struck a deal because that poster had a name of another writer at the time. And he actually thought that he was going to drive the ship, and I love him. But it's like, no, they gave him to us, and you were supposed to help me. And then it became like this weird Cap versus the KKK in his script, and I'm like, yeah, we're not doing this. So I called Jeph, I inquired at WonderCon, and the thing that I totally remember, now you gotta understand, when I called Jeph, I have 50 pages. I actually had to write a letter to Marvel saying, I apologize. I went over the page limit on Captain America #1. It was supposed to be like 42 pages, and I'm like sitting here, I'm inking page 50, and this is going to 56. So if they don't, this better go through, because I've like done too much in the first issue. And they're like, Rob, that's fine. So I called Jeph, and I said, dude, I have a story. I need somebody to help me finish it, script it, write it. Are you involved? Are you in? And Jeph said, you don't have 50 pages. And I said, I'll send them to you tomorrow. And he told me later, he got them the next day. We sent Xeroxes of all 50 pages, and he got them, and he said, Rob, I thought you like had 5 pages, and you were lying to me. And I'm like, no, dude, it's here. And honestly, Jeph said, I'll have a script for you on this, send me everything you do. And I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, it was a great marriage. You know, when you go, oh my gosh, I am with like the most talented writer I've worked with in forever. And that Cap stuff, jumping ahead, like Jeph said, look, most of my favorite shows get canceled. That doesn't mean they're not good. It just means not enough people watch them, you know? But my wife and I always go, like, there was a show called Reunion on Fox, and we were totally into it, and it was a murder, and they canceled it in the 10th episode, and you're like, but who killed that person in episode 1? And you know, and it's like Jericho. Jericho is like one of my favorite shows of all time. I even sent in peanuts to help save the show. And then like, they canceled it midway through the second season, you're like, this sucks. But, you know, so just because something doesn't sell well doesn't mean it's not good. And the Mark Waid, Ron Garney run was fantastic. And they had a year. They hired us in 1994, and we knew that we would be launching in 96. So Waid and Garney had 12 months to basically run us off the book. Those issues are exceptional, but like Jeph said, they sold, I think at their peak, they sold 36,000 copies at a time when the top books were selling 300, 200,000 copies. And so when Jeph and I got together and Heroes Were Born, again, it's one of these things that we've dispelled along the way, but at the time I was like, oh, Heroes Were Born, it was cool to hate. And the entire staff of Marvel hated it. So we had an entire company that hated what we were doing because they thought that they were going to give the company to Wildstorm and Extreme. And to be honest, that almost happened. So they had a right to be worried. But they were going to relocate to Southern California and job out all the Marvel books. So, but right now there was 4 books. But while we were doing those, they were going to turn into 8 and 10 books. And Jim and I had like Silver Surfer, Defenders. We were like, this is going to be awesome. And Marvel was flying out with us all the time. And our numbers, Cap, came in at 300,000 copies. And it had 1 variant. How many variants do you get on a Marvel launch today? You get 7. X-Force, 7. Bendis' Avengers that came out, did it have 10? And like issue 7 of Avengers has 7 covers with your Red Hulk. So it's like, we had 2 variants. Like back in the day, you think in the 90s as the variant, whorehouse. We had 2. We had 2 variants on Cap and Fantastic Four. And I remember Jeph and I signing Mile High Comics. And there was 1,000 people.
It was wide.
And we signed for like 4 hours over the limit. And Jeff's like, Rob, I've never experienced this before. And I'm like, yay! And that was the beginning of the monster that is now Jeph Loeb. Red Hulk, Jeph Loeb, Heroes, Jeph Loeb, Lost, Jeph Loeb, head of Marvel Television. So I knew Jeph Loeb when.